This next poem is titled Erstwhile, and it comes from the collection titled Whirling. It's the second poem that we look at from Chris Wallace-Crabbe's collection that is focused on his son and the memory of his son who passed away. The title itself, Whirling, suggests that a range of emotions and memories were going about in the author's mind whilst writing this collection, which makes a lot of sense then that we're returning to another memory of his son. So as I mentioned, this one is another poem for his son, whom he lost. But this one is written 4 years after the other poem, which is titled Elegy. And so a great amount of time has passed, perhaps more time to grieve and accept the loss. And as such, the tone of this poem, the structure of this poem is quite different to Elegy. The way that this poem is written is interesting in and of itself, in that Chris Wallace-Crabbe was created a dramatized persona of himself as he features in the poem, interacting with his son's former girlfriend who pays a visit. Like the other poem, though, it's quite literal in parts. It is still a poem which is mourning the loss of the son. Now, if we have a look at the title itself, Erstwhile, it's quite the archaic term. We don't tend to use this term in everyday speech. But it references the idea of the former, that idea of, once upon a time, that which is not there anymore. And so he's using this to refer to his son. His son is erstwhile. And it's how he's chosen to capture the memory of his son now, after some time has passed. It opens in an interesting fashion. He says, "Your girlfriend rang me up today." Your former girlfriend. No, that isn't right. The present friend of all that once was you. The opening use of this sort of second person pronoun is interesting. He's directing it, or almost reflecting or speaking to his son. Whom he knows is gone. But the segments of silence and insecurity that are here reflect one of those experiences that are really common for those who've lost someone. Because here he has to re-articulate the bonds that had been formed. She shows up, but she's not his girlfriend anymore. nor really his former girlfriend. He doesn't like the choice of that particular term. And so you see that insecurity in being able to identify how to refer to her. The present friend of all that once was you is how he chooses to settle on it. And that she still obviously cares for him, but he himself is no longer there. And that's then reiterated with this little part here, your fetch. So an interesting term, sort of referring to, his ghost that, reappears in memory. And then talks about him in the way that he sees him now. What remains in the little photographs. And we get the colon here, starting to articulate what he sees as the remnants of him. And this section here and the way that it's structured reflects the ghost-like erstwhile nature of his son now, who's no longer physically there. So to start off with, we can see the use of quite weak openings to some of the lines. Nothing distinct or concrete. We can see that they're fleeting memories that are being referenced. There's nothing substantial in this section of the poem, which is reflecting upon who the son was. And so structurally, the writing and the way that it's been put together, the syntax reflects the nature of how the son is now. Also, we can see the use of the enjambment here. In this instance, it's creating almost like a tumbling effect. All of these memories just sort of flow out of the author as he's recollecting who his son was. And so you see this flood of emotion. It comes out in this midsection of the poem. It's all one sentence. And in that sense, it resembles one of the elements of elegy, which as a poem as a whole was one continuous sentence itself. And so he describes him, a boy in black and white, riding a horse into the scrub, or freckled, reading out of doors, both times t-shirted, your hair a thick, dark bowl cut. And then there's, again, this contemplative pause. We've had this flood of emotions come through before he remembers it is his erstwhile son. This is someone who's no longer there. These things are what he once was, not what he is now. And then it comes back to the present, if you like. And so what we see is this break, this line break here, demonstrates a shift because the second part is more controlled, more grounded, as he comes back to the more recent memory of the visit from the ex-girlfriend. Oh yes, she rang today, had taken somebody out to see your grave near the forked white trunk, and we were sad together on the phone for a hard while thinking of you, long gone now. Hence. So this use of hence, again, links very closely to the idea of that term, erstwhile. And just as this first part of this verse is continuous, again with the use of enjambment, continually flowing line into line, he then does use the caesura here to force a stop, because he can sense his emotions taking him away, going back into that reflection, whereas the caesura stops the flow of the memories. It brings him back. And so we end, again, with retrospection. He is gone. He is hence. He is erstwhile. This last little section, commences with this questioning, where are you? And the author then comes in to the poem himself. In poor fact, I can never come to grasp the meaning of it all, supposing that to be what religion's all about. And so just as we've seen in so many of the poems by Chris Wallace-Crabbe, he comes back to this search for meaning. He seeks an understanding for life and for everything that happens in life. But in this particular instance, some sort of explanation, some sort of justification for why he had to lose his son. But in reality, there is nothing to find. He cannot find that meaning. And so the ending, the loss remains behind, like never being well. So this split in the line, the pause, the contemplation, lends itself to the pace of the poem. He is continuously reflecting. He will never recover from the loss. And so that sadness that we saw in Elegy is still here in this poem, Erstwhile. But structurally, it's far more controlled than Elegy. It's less raw. It's more nostalgic as a comparison. And unlike the poem Reality, where Chris Wallace-Crabbe reflects upon his father and a memory of his father, who he's also lost, that carries with it a slightly warmer tone, because in the grand scheme of things, that is the natural cycle of life, to lose one's parents at some point. But the loss of the son is something that he never feels as though he will recover from. It's a different type of pain that's being explored in this poem from the collection Whirling. So that was Erstwhile by Chris Wallace-Crabbe.